Now he's your friend.
All right, I'd like to call the July meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals to order. If you will call the roll.
Mr. Yulhorn? Here. Ms. Hicks?
Here.
Ms. Sherman? Here. Mr. Browndyke?
Here.
Mr. Harless?
Here.
Alderman Gibson?
Here.
Chairman Sisson?
Here. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. A few notes about the Board of Zoning Appeals. We are a quasi-judicial body, and as such, the latitude for acting on applications is somewhat limited by state statute and city ordinance. This meeting is being recorded, and those appearing before the board will need to identify themselves, give their address, and be sworn in for the record. At that time, if you approach and would like to speak in front of our commission, if you would come to the podium to my right, that would be helpful. And any person speaking to the commission, if they would be certain to speak into the microphone, as well as members of the commission, so that we can be recorded. The other note about the BZA is that motions made in this meeting are of the affirmative nature, and that does not necessarily mean that the motion will be approved, but the language used will be affirmative when the motion is made, and then the motion will either be voted up or down. Our next order of business is to approve the June minutes, the minutes for the June meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Yulhorn?
Yes.
Ms. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Browndyke?
Yes.
Mr. Harless?
Yes.
Ms. Sherman?
Abstain.
Alderman Gibson?
Yes.
Chairman Sisson?
Yes. And at this time, we are going in,
Swear in.
we're going to go into the portion of our meeting that involves staff reports. So at this time, I was going to swear in the staff. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right. And I will turn it over to staff for our first presentation.
The first item before you is at 9263 Glenda Road. It is the request for a variance to allow additional driveways in the front yard on a corner lot in the residential estate district. This application came before you last month with a 4 variance request. As mentioned, this is in the residential estate zoning district, and as you can see, it's a corner lot. In the residential estate district, corner lots have 2 front yards, each having 60-foot yard setbacks. The applicant's original request was for 4 variances. The additional driveways, the width of the driveway, the carport, and then the additional gates. However, now the applicant has reduced their request to only ask for additional driveways. Oops. This was the original request there, calling out the 4 different variances. This is the revised request. So per the code, per section 23-88, you are allowed 1 driveway no more than 18 inches in width. The applicant is proposing to have a driveway here on Scarlet, which would connect with driveways off of Glenda. The driveway portions that are highlighted are the portions that are in the front yard setback, and that is the portion that is regulated per section 2388. This portion behind the front yard setback is not part of the variance request. The applicant is requesting the variance due to the nature of the lot. This is a corner lot with deep front yard setbacks, which makes it somewhat more constricting to develop in comparison with other lots in the area. There is also somewhat of a slope from the street to the front of the house. There's a 10-foot slope there, which presents some design constraints for the lot. The applicant is here for questions, should you have some, and this concludes staff's report.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions of staff?
Yes, I have a question. The width of the driveway on Scarlet, is that, did you say 18 feet is the,
It's less than 18 feet. The width of the driveway, I believe, is 12 feet. If I could, yes, 12 feet is the width of the driveway here. Yeah,
so it's within code?
yes, it's
So
less
they
than
only,
code.
they're only asking for
The
a
amount.
variance for 2 cuts?
The amount of driveway, not the width, just the amount. Mhm.
All right, any other further questions of staff? Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of the variance? If you'll come forward. If you'll please state your name and your address,
My name is Arsalan Shirwani. I live on 1771 Dickens Cove.
and if you'll raise your right hand, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
So I want to thank the zoning board and the staff for allowing me to be here and the help from the professional staff from developing the application. As you guys know, I was here last month with the request, and if you can show the slide with the previous request. Since then, we've changed the orientation of the house. It is tilted, has been drawn back a little bit, and the orientation of the driveways have been changed. There was concern about the gates and the carport being in the setback, as well as the driveway in front of the garage being in violation. We've withdrawn all of those. The only thing we're asking for is the additional driveway. We've taken into consideration also some of the suggestions that were made by the neighbors in terms of they had objection to all of those things, which we have accommodated and withdrawn those. And some of the suggestions they had was to avoid the driveways being opposite other driveways. So both the driveways on Glenda are not in front of the driveways of the other houses. They were concerned that, you back out of one and you get into the other one. So they've been moved also. Again, in terms of the lot, it is a difficult lot. I mean, from the Scarlet all the way back, it's somewhere around 18 to 20 feet of drop in this lot. And in this subdivision, especially in the new houses, none of the other houses is exposed to this kind of a drop. The houses opposite to us on Glenda have the same slope, but it's 2 houses in there, and they're oriented differently. So each one of them is exposed only to half the slope. We are exposed to the entire slope, or the entire 18 feet. So when we design the house, we have to accommodate all of that in this. Secondly, the Glenda kind of turns back, as it goes west, it turns towards south, and that makes the lot narrower as you go towards the end of the cove. So because of all of this, we have to arrange the driveways accordingly. Now, the house has almost like 2 fronts. So the main front of the house is facing Scarlet. That's the main entrance, and that's where we need access for that. But the side that faces Scarlet also is almost like a front. It's been, the elevation is like a front of the house, and that entrance off of Scarlet, where we had the carport, is actually almost like a front door, and it'll be used for if you have an outdoor event or outdoor gathering. So instead of people coming in from the front door and walking through the house, it just connects through a hallway directly into the pool area. So that's why we wanted access to both areas of the house, the front of the house on Scarlet and the front of the house on Glenda. In terms of how this differs from some of the other houses that are developed, the front of the house on Scarlet is almost 130 feet from the street and down a 10-foot slope. So the house we live on now, we have a circular driveway, but that house is 40 feet from the driveway, and it's nearly flat, 5-foot elevation. So you can park on the street and you can just walk up. Here, parking on the street and walking down Scarlet is a little difficult. That's why we'd prefer that we would have access to the front of the house like that. Same thing is on the side as well. As far as the access to the garage is concerned, in our current house, the garage is towards the back of the house. We did not build it in the front of the house. And so the driveway extends to the back. And same thing we wanted in this house also, the garage is towards the back of the house. The neighbors also don't see this much because there are only two other houses in that area. One where the Glenda dead ends, and the house that's opposite to us. We tried to design the garage facing towards the end of the cove, but because of the setbacks and everything, it just would not fit. So we had to make it facing towards the street. So we just need access to the garage and the two fronts. And the way, driveways are expensive. So I don't want to build extra driveways if I don't have to. It'll cost me more money to build these extra driveways. So I'm doing it because I need them, not because I like driveways or I like to, waste my money on them. So that's my reasoning why this has been done.
Thank you very much. Is there questions of the applicant?
This was an accommodation by the location of the side driveways for the neighbors that had opposing inlets across the street?
Yes, sir. So in both the location of the driveways were adjusted based on that. Now, one other thing that I did not mention, and it was not in the staff presentation, last time when we had presented this, there are other houses within this neighborhood, within this particular subdivision that have two entrances, circular driveway, and one that has 3 curb cuts and 3 driveways. And of course, if you go into the general neighborhood, I'm not talking about other parts of Germantown, just down the street. We had shown a slide at the time of last presentation where there are numerous houses that have circular driveway with 2 curb cuts, and then 3 curb cuts on multiple houses that have corner lots. And so what we are doing here is not unique, that we're doing something different. And this size lots and this size houses in that general neighborhood, there are lots of houses built this way.
All right. I
Madam
do want.
Chairman, may I ask a question?
Oh, yes. go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I changed my mind when you offered earlier. You just mentioned that there were others in the neighborhood that had 3 driveways or 2. I cannot find any that have 3. I can find one that has 2. Can you tell me where the other properties are?
So there are, if you follow Scarlett and reach
Johnson?
So there's a house on the right, on the south side, that has 2 driveways, 2 curb cuts.
Right.
The house opposite has 3. And it's not very easily visible. It's a smaller house with older house with smaller driveways, but I've gone and looked at it, it's there. And I also know because the owner is a friend of mine. So, because last time there was some contention whether they are or not, and I called them, I went to his property and looked at it, it has 3.
And is that's not notated. I think you submitted a page with the red stars.
Mhm.
The house that you're saying on the west side of Johnson, I don't see that notated on your paper.
It may not have been because when you look at Google Maps, it's not easily visible from that because of trees and things. It's not easy to see. But if you are on that street, you can easily see that it has 3 entrances. And because of this confusion at the time of last presentation, I went back to confirm. And I both looked at the property and I called the owner as well. And it has 3 entrances. So there's one house with 3 entrances in this particular neighborhood, and then at least 3 that have 2 circular driveway with 2 curb cuts. And then if you go to the neighborhood right next door, which was marked on the presentation here in, oh, there it is. I'm trying to orient myself. So yes, if you see the Highland is on the top left corner, and you can see all these houses have 2, and then several that have 3. And then our house is marked in a circle here, but the house that has 3 is not visible on this slide.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions of the applicant?
I just have a question for staff. Is there an ordinance for the number of vehicles allowed in a driveway? And I guess the reason why I would be asking is it could become,
Just
And
can't
Mr.
park on
Brown,
the grass.
If I could, and Joe, I think you'll probably allude to this, there is an ordinance that says how many can be side by side.
No, there's not a limit on
Chairman.
the,
Yeah, before you get started, sorry.
Oh,
Could you
sorry.
state your name and your address?
Joe Nunes, Neighborhood Services Manager, City of Germantown.
And if you'll raise your right hand, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. In answer to your question, Mr. Brown-Dyke, there is no limit on the number of cars parked in a driveway. The only limit would be if it has to be operable. So there would be nothing that would state you could feasibly park any number of cars on that driveway.
And it has to be on concrete, it can't be on the grass, right?
Yes. Yeah, it has to be parked on a paved
Solid
surface.
surface.
Yeah, or driveway.
Well, the reason for the question, it just seems like the square footage of the driveway is almost equal or maybe even greater than the house square footage. And that could potentially invite maybe like a parking lot as opposed to using the driveway simply to drive your car in and out.
Mhm.
So I just didn't want that to be an issue with
Yeah.
the neighborhood becoming a parking lot, basically. So if there's no ordinance.
No, there is nothing that addresses that currently in our ordinance.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right. Other questions of the applicant?
I did have a question. Dr. Schwanny, what would your intention be for the use of this driveway? For the one off of Scarlet and Glendon?
So the way I envision this is the driveway off of Scarlet and Glenda, that loop is used by guests. And so, so the one off of Glenda that's on the top right and the one off of Scarlet. This loop is used by guests. I'm allowed 18 feet wide driveway. If you have 16 to 17 feet, you can get 2 cars through. But these driveways are 12 feet wide. So we've kept them narrow to minimize, again, the amount of concrete. And it just makes it easier to get in and out of the lot. And again, part of the issue is the slope. So if you are coming down from Scarlet into the driveway, it's hard to back out of it. So having an access, whichever way you enter, you have an access to get out rather than having to drive out, backing into the street. The one on Glenda at the end is primarily for our access to get in and out of the garage. And you can argue that, well, don't build that, just build these two, but then that has the potential of blocking our access because the driveways are narrow. And so if one car that's parked improperly, or even on an 18-foot wide, if somebody parks in the middle, you're blocked from getting out of your own house. So this provides us that access, and that's about it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, other questions of the applicant? All right, thank you very much for coming. Yes.
I just want to make one point about the parking issue. So we don't want to make it into a parking lot. The area that you see for parking cars is in the front of the house, and that's behind the setback. So we're not putting that in the front. We deliberately pulled the house back, made sure that that area is within the front set, is outside the front setback required area. And even there, the parking space is for 5 cars. So it's not like parking 20 cars. This is where 3 or 4 or 5 guests come, the cars are there, they leave, they have access both sides to get out of the property. But it is not for overnight parking. If we have an overnight, our own garage for overnight parking, we wouldn't be, leaving cars outside if we have, our own indoor parking.
All right, thank you very much for presenting to us. At this time, is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the variance? Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to the variance? And then it seems that staff has a note.
I would like to note that staff did receive one email of concern from a resident. I will just read what the resident said. It said, there are valid reasons the city restricts the number of driveway entrances into streets, whether residential or commercial. What seems most pertinent to the neighborhood is, 1, each exit to a residential street increases the danger to pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists, particularly if landscaping hides the exiting motorist. 2, negative environmental impact of increased water and chemical runoff into our city sewer and water, the adjacent creek, and 2 miles after the Wolf River. 3, multiple entrances can be confusing for emergency vehicles, particularly after dark. And 4, increased costs to taxpayers for curb maintenance throughout the city. So that was the email that staff received. Otherwise, we did not receive any comments or phone calls regarding this case.
Okay, Thank you very much. We note the receipt of that document. Commissioner Alderman Gibson, Commissioner Alderman Gibson.
Thank you. You actually completed the sentence that we were in receipt of that email. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Okay. Dr. Swanee, if you wanted to make a brief comment on that.
I think those are all valid concerns, but I would like to respond to them. As far as, you know, a danger to whether it's pedestrians or bicycles or other cars, these are clearly marked. These are not like hidden behind big trees or anything like that. They are no different than any other exits. There are two houses opposite us on Glenda, and both have, you know, driveways. And for the same amount of space, there'll be two driveways. So it's not like, you know, there are two driveways on that side, and there are 3, 4, or 5 on this side. So there are two driveways on that side, 2 exits on that side, 2 exits on this side. Furthermore, with moving the one on Glenda further west, there's only one gate there, the house that is at the end of the street. So that's the only one where some traffic would be coming out. So there's nobody else that's coming across. As far as the one off of Scarlett, there is a house opposite being built, but again, it's our proposed driveway, then the neighbors next door, and then the one opposite them. So those are, again, very clearly marked. These are not behind big vegetations or anything like that. And again, with this design, we prevent cars from reversing out of the driveway, where they wouldn't see, you know, kids or bicycles or whatever. Same thing is true for any emergency vehicles. This actually gives us the safety that if you have this large a lot, one driveway, and that's blocked, and you have a 10-foot incline or a 7-foot incline from the top of Glenda, you actually have access both to get in and get out of the house. So, and again, these are not behind tall walls that nobody knows what's there. Emergency vehicle comes, whether it's fire brigade or police or, you know, ambulance. They see the house, they see the driveway. There's no issue with that. As far as any environmental impact, that's the reason, you know, we've tried to minimize the amount of driveway that is there. We're not building 18-foot driveways. These are 12 where we can. And this house is no different than the neighborhood that you've seen on the drawing. Almost every house, including 4 in this particular neighborhood, have this amount of driveway in there. So.
Thank you very much. At this time, is there any comments from the commission?
I'd like to make a motion that we restrict this request to 1 additional cut rather than 2. I think Dr. Swanee has done a good job of eliminating the other variances, and I applaud him for doing that, for listening to the neighbors. I think his comments about 2 or 3 curb cuts in other houses in the neighborhood, really, you know, we're here to address this one. We don't know what caused the reasons for the other curb cuts, and so we can't use that as justification for approving yours. And I would think 1 additional curb cut for you, which would allow you to either make it off of Glenda and around to Scarlett. You could widen your driveway from 12 to 15 feet and still do everything that you want to do. So I would like to make the motion that we revise it to 1 curb cut, if that's appropriate.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So we're modifying his application?
The motion in front of us is for 1 additional curb cut rather than 2. So.
I understand, but that's not what he's applied for.
Well, my understanding from staff is that we can modify his request. Is that correct?
He's applying for one thing, and we're making a motion to do something different. We need to vote on what he's asked for.
You're not changing the content of what he's asking for. He's asking for additional driveways. You are limiting the number of driveways that he can have, and you're allowed to do that.
I just figured we'd vote it straight up or down. with what he's
Well,
requesting.
You could move to amend the motion that's in front of us and see if you get a second.
No, I'll follow suit with what you want to do, but he's applied for 3, and what's coming out is that we're saying we're making a motion for 2 rather than yes or no on what he's asked for.
You can vote Mr. Harless' motion up or down, and it would go back to the original motion,
Okay.
which is what he asked for.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion in front of us, which is different than the motion originally requested. So we've got a motion in front of us and seconded for 1 additional curb cut in addition to the 1 that everybody gets, for a total of 2 curb cuts. And that motion would not pick which curb cuts he gets. He gets 2 curb cuts and he can figure out which 2, where he wants to place the 2, correct?
Point of
Yes.
clarification, are we talking about, did your motion mean that 1 curb cut was on Glenda and 1 was on Scarlet?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the motion in front of us is to have 1 curb cut on Glenda and 1 curb cut on Scarlet, and that has been seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Is there any discussion? Have we got a second?
Yeah, I'm opening for discussion. If there's no discussion, then we can call for a vote. Okay,
Well, we're saying that there are other neighborhoods that are in close proximity that have 3. I've been doing this a long time on many commissions, and all of a sudden, we've got parking pads, circular driveways, and whether somebody can have 2 or 3 inlets, and this is a 2-acre lot. It's not like we're putting a 15,000-foot standard 100 by 150 on this. And I'm beginning to wonder if we don't need to revisit some of these ordinances. I can understand why we got the parking pads so we don't park on grass and that sort of thing. But to amend what he's requesting, I can't go along with.
okay. If you'll call the roll, we're gonna vote this motion up or down, and then following that, we will.
Excuse me,
we may have further action.
could you repeat the motion one more time?
The motion is to allow a variance of 1 additional curb cut so that he would have 2 curb cuts, 1 on Scarlet and 1 on Glenda.
That's fine. And if it passes, then what do? Vote again to see if he can have the 3 that he's applied for? Huh?
If there's a motion, so we vote this down, or up or down, and then you can
Could
make
he
a.
not reapply for the variance that he was
No,
initially?
no, he wouldn't even have to. Once we vote this motion, then someone can make another motion for everything that he's asked for.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so let's vote on the motion in front of us. If you'll call the roll.
Mr. Harless,
Yes.
Ms. Sherman,
No.
Mr. Yulhorn,
No.
Ms. Hicks,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson,
No.
Mr. Browndike,
No.
Chairman Sisson.
No. So that motion did not pass. Do I have another motion?
Move to approve the motion.
All right, so
I mean,
this
the
would be
application. Move to
a
approve.
motion
As a
to,
revision.
to approve, sorry. Okay, so this is a motion to approve a variance to allow additional driveways as set forth in the application, subject to staff comments and the site plan submitted. So, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and is there any discussion that needs to be had?
I would just comment that I think the policy that we have, and Frank, I agree, if we need to revisit all of these,
I
we
think we
should. Okay, but, I guess I'm looking at what we've got in front of us, the policy that we currently have. And in my thought was giving him 1 additional, because most of the homes in the area, to your point, have 2. Very, very few have 3. And I think if we start granting 3, we're really opening Pandora's box. So
And
that's
I
just
agree
my-
with you. The underlying difference here for me is that this is an RE lot of 2-acre minimum, where the others may be RE1 or even less of just R. So those have both 2 and on occasion 3, and they're pretty much standard size lots, where this has its own zoning as an RE, 2 acres, which would be 6 standard size 15,000 foot lots.
But there's nothing in the Germantown policy that allows, you know, and maybe that's where we need to make some changes.
I think it is, Mike.
And I would-
mean, that's my position on the deal. It's big enough to accommodate what's being asked for.
I would like to just note to your comment about opening Pandora's box, as we have discussed in this application and with other applications, each application that comes in front of us has a different set of circumstances, and we look and vote on that application based on the circumstances and information presented to us at that time. So I understand your concern, and certainly a concern of mine as well, but I would note that, just for the record, that applications come with their own set of circumstances.
Go ahead, Al.
As far as the findings for me, it really has less to do with what the neighbors have or don't have. What it comes down for me is the exceptional topography. That 18-foot from front to the very back, that is what I would consider part of an acceptable variance request. And so in looking at that, from the front to the house, there's that 10-foot drop. And then if you've got guests that you don't want to have to walk from a side street to a front entrance, I'm just trying to think how that can flow. And so for me, I will be voting in favor of the motion because of that exceptional topographic condition.
I will comment that I think you've done a great job. I imagine you've had some conversations with the neighbors, so thank you for all you've done to work with them. This neighborhood is different than Ingleside, which I think is to your north. So the character of this neighborhood is more rural, and I believe I can't find maybe one other home that has 2 driveways in it. So most of these properties that have been redeveloped are redeveloped with 1 driveway, and I feel that because you're a corner lot, I would be good with 2. So I will be voting no on the 3.
Wait, I'm sorry. We would need to have you up at the microphone in order to make a comment, just for recording purposes, but I think we're
in the middle of the motion.
Got everything. So we got this motion. I think everybody's made their comments. Let's call the roll for a vote.
Mr. Brown Dyke.
Yes.
Alderman Gibson.
Yes.
Ms. Hicks.
No.
Mr. Yulhorn.
Yes.
Ms. Sherman.
Yes.
Mr. Harless.
No.
Chairman Sisson.
Yes. And the motion passes. Thank you to the applicant and to everyone who expressed their opinions and worked on this. We are now on to our next item on the agenda, and I'll turn it over to staff for that report.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Sisson. The request before you is at 2601 Howard Road. It is the request for a variance to allow additional driveway in the front yard on a corner lot in the R single-family residential district. The subject property is located on the corner of Howard and Stout Road. There is currently, there you can see the subject property on the corner, and there is currently 1 existing driveway. It is off of Stout Road, and they do have a parking pad, which is allowed by right for the code. The applicant is asking for additional driveway off of Howard, connecting to the driveway on Stout. As mentioned, this is in the R zoning district, which establishes a minimum front setback of 40 feet from the property line. So this second driveway would be in that 40 feet. Here you can see very lightly the dash line, that's the 40-foot front setback. So the lower portion here and this portion on Stout Road is within the front yard setback. I would also like to clarify that in the applicant's request, there was also a request for materials. Unfortunately, staff didn't notice for that portion of it, so we talked with the applicant before the meeting, and the applicant would like to move forward with the request that was noticed, which is the additional variance, and then they will come back at another time for other materials for the driveway. The applicant is requesting this variance due to the nature of the lot. As mentioned, it's a corner on a busy road, and also on Stout, there is not curb and gutter, it's more of a ditch, so it is a safety concern for the applicant. And additionally, the driveway, the proposed driveway is in keeping with the character of the area. They are trying to preserve mature trees, which are outlined here, which is part of the reason for the meandering path of the proposed driveway. The driveway would also only be 10 feet wide, which is below the 18-foot maximum allowable width. A representative for the applicant is here. If you have questions for the applicant, this concludes staff's report.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions from staff? Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this variance? Yeah. If you'll state your name and your address.
I'm Hallie Carr at 2589 Howard Road.
And if you'll raise your right hand, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much. Okay, if you have any additional comments to share with us on this, whatever you'd like to share.
Well, I really don't have any more to say than what is stated in the application. It's just, it is super dangerous to back out on Stout now because there's so much more traffic, especially with that development that's going on in the back of the neighborhood. So we would just like to have somewhere to enter where you could actually nose out of the driveway instead of back out.
Sure. I understand the statement you made.
Thank you.
Is there any questions of the applicant?
Just one. The application has Robert Howard, and I didn't catch your name, but I don't think it was Robert.
No, I'm not Robert. I'm Hallie. I'm his daughter.
Thank you.
He got called away on business.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, say that again about it's been amended to be something other than gravel?
Oh, no, the variance in front of us, the request in front of us is simply to add the additional curb cut. We are not addressing any materials, and that would have to be addressed at another meeting. So, and I apologize for any confusion related to that. Question?
Just more of a statement, just a point of notation that I actually live on Howard Road as well.
So
I'm
do
on the north part. I'm at 2262 Howard. So
Okay.
just,
Full disclosure.
yeah, full
Okay.
disclosure, no collusion.
I live next door to this house, so that was my grandmother's.
Okay.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Do I have a motion?
I was just going to say thank you for looking out for the trees. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, do we need to have any discussion? I guess I'll make a note that I drive down Stout. I've grown up in Germantown. I know it's a busy street, and I can understand the need to have an alternate access. So, and I also appreciate your desire to save the trees and try to adjust what you need around those items. So, if you will call the roll, please.
Mr. Harless?
Yes, I'd also like to make the comment that you need to make sure you tell your dad that the crushed limestone has not been approved, so he needs to work through with staff to get that resolved. But I vote yes.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Yulhorn?
Yes.
Ms. Hicks?
Because of the unique nature of Stout Road and the developments around her, yes.
Alderman Gibson?
I vote yes because of the uniqueness of the placement there at Stout and Howard. Thank
Mr. Browndike?
I also vote yes, and mainly also because of the conditions on when you're turning off of McVeigh onto Stout, heading west. That's a very sharp turn with traffic. Easier to turn east, though, but turning west, though. But I would vote yes.
Chairman Sisson?
Yes. And the motion passes. Thank you very much. Is there any old business or new business that we need to take care of? There being no further business, I adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.